Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 29th of October of 2024. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, today we have the significant number of changes on the ground, and today indeed we have too many Russian flags raised all over the entire South Donetsk direction. First, let's talk about the villages of Shakhtarska and Yasnaya Polyana. According to information we have, during the previous 24 hours, the Russians managed to improve their position significantly and to enter the central part of the village by the name of Shakhtarska. This information was confirmed by neutral mappers. We still haven't received anything that can confirm this Russian progress. And also we have the information about additional Russian progress on the territory of the village by the name of Yasnaya Polyana. This is very important video, and in this video we can see how two Russian soldiers entered the roof of three storage buildings and raised the Russian flag. And this video of course was immediately geolocated. There is nothing special, nothing difficult with this, and based on this video we have adjusted the map in Russian favor. A few important things that I would like to point to your attention. First of all, this video doesn't mean that the entire village of Yasnaya Polyana was captured. We are talking just about the southwestern part. And another important thing that I would like to discuss with you, just yesterday on the 28th of October we got the first video how the Russians entered this tree line and began moving in the direction of Yasnaya Polyana. We have already discussed this video. There were two Russian soldiers, two stormtroopers of the armored force of Russian Federation that were moving in the northern direction with the purpose to reinforce the Russian positions inside of the settlement, and today we received the video with the Russian flag. Some Russian sources have already reported that the Russians managed to take the entire settlement under Russian control. We can't confirm this, but we have no doubts that this is going to happen maybe during the next few days or maybe even this upcoming night. The situation is very dynamic, and the situation can be changed several times just during the few hours. Now let's move further and let's talk about the situation in the village of Novoukrainka. And this is very interesting settlement because according to different maps, the Russians also managed to improve their positions during the previous 24 hours. The Russians captured the southeastern part of the settlement, and now the Russians control around 80-95% of the southern part, and according to different mappers the Russians haven't entered the northern part. But the most important thing about this settlement is that since the beginning of the Russian South Donetsk greatest offensive operation, we still haven't received even a single video that confirm the Russian presence on the territory of the settlement. We have the videos with Russian presence in Shakhtarska, in Yasnaya Polyana. We have lots of updates from Bohoiavlenka, but as for the Novoukrainka, we have nothing from this territory. It doesn't mean that the Russians are not there, but probably the clashes on the territory of this settlement is very heavy. Anyway, these are the changes on the ground in comparison between the 28th of October and the end of the 29th of October. Now let's talk about the settlement, about the village by the name of Bohoiavlenka. Just yesterday we colored the southern part of the settlement. Just yesterday we colored the eastern part of the settlements, and we marked the western farms as contested area. And today we received a significant number of updates from the northern part. Also, we had the report of the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation that was published today, and the Russians are saying that the group of forces Vostok or East in English managed to seize control over the settlement. And also we have report from pro-Ukrainian mappers that also confirmed the situation. And of course we have the video. We have the video from the most northwestern part of the settlement, from the northwestern farms. We can see two Russian soldiers that entered the territory of the farms and raised the Russian flag on the most western position, in the most northwestern position of this settlement. So based on this video, most of the mappers have adjusted their maps in Russian favor. So let's discuss once again the situation. The Russians managed to establish complete control over the village of Bohoiavlenka. We have some problems with the village of Novoukrainka. Most likely the village of Yasnaya Polyana was captured by the Russians, and most likely the Russians are about to finish the battle for the village of Shakhtarska. So 4 villages just in 4 or 5 days were captured by the Russians, and we see almost no resistance from the armored forces of Ukraine. Once again, this is the situation on the 25th of October, just 4 days ago. And starting on the 26th of October, almost every single day we were receiving more and more videos that confirmed additional Russian progress on the ground. But this is not the end of the story, because today we continue receiving updates from the settlement by the name of Katerynivka. Just yesterday we discussed that most likely the Ukrainians in the northwestern part were encircled and blocked by the Russians, and today the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation confirmed that as a result of clashes, the group of forces south managed to establish complete control over the village by the name of Katerynivka, and the Russians, of course, as usually, publish the Russian flag in the central part of the settlement. So this is the situation in this area, and according to different sources, currently the armed forces of Russian Federation are heading towards the village of Yelizavetovka. Currently there are very heavy clashes for the southeastern farms of the settlement. So this is the force direction of the South Donetsk Russian offensive operation. And summarizing everything, and I believe that you are following different military experts, different channels and so on, everybody is drawing arrows, everybody is drawing lines and many other things, and most of the military experts and mappers came to conclusion that most likely during the next few days or several days the Russians will be able to take under control everything that lays below this red line. We're talking, of course, Shakhtarska, Yasnaya Polyana, Maximovka, Novoukrainka, Bohoiavlenka, Yelizavetovka, Ilinka, Antonovka. So all these settlements below this red line may be captured by the Russians during the next few days. And this is going to be, according to many military experts, is the southern part of Kurakhove cauldron. Now let's move further and let's talk about the eastern part of Kurakhove, where we also got lots of geolocation, lots of videos. The Ukrainians are trying to slow the Russians down. The Ukrainians are trying to counterattack, but the problem is that the Russians currently have the complete superiority with FPV drones and reconnaissance drone, and every time another tank comes to the line of combat contact, it destroyed by the Russians' FPV drones. In this video we can see another Leopard that Ukrainians tried to use to stop the Russians, but the Leopard was destroyed. Also, we have additional changes on the ground along the line between the village of Maximilianovka and the town of Kurakhove. We have the video of how the Ukrainians of the 46th Air Mobile Brigade, that has almost lost its combat capabilities, was trying to slow down the Russians. Some of the episodes were geolocated exactly in this sector, and we have adjusted the map in Russian favor based on this video. Now let's move further, and when talking about this part, we understand that most likely if Yelizavetovka, Ilinka and Antonovka falls, most likely the Russians will be able to maintain the line of combat contact along this red line, and this is going to be the eastern and the southeastern flank of Kurakhove cauldron. Now let's move further and let's talk about the situation that took place in the northern flank of Kurakhove cauldron. We are going to talk about the settlements like Kurakhovka, Gornyak and many others. First, let's talk about Gornyak. According to the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation, as a result of clashes, the group of forces center managed to establish complete control over this settlement. And based on this video, we have adjusted the map in Russian favor. Before this report, before the Ministry of Defense report, the central southern parts of the settlement of Gornyak were marked as contested area. But after the report of Ministry of Defense, we have adjusted the map in Russian favor. Furthermore, different mappers reported that the Russians entered the northern part of Kurakhovka, and that there are very heavy clashes right now in this area. And I would like to point your attention to one important thing, and this is very important. Currently, we can see the Kurakhove offensive operation, but this offensive operation has a lot of is completely different from the offensive operations we used to see before. Why is that? First of all, as for the Kurakhove direction, we see that three Russian armies are involved in this operation. And it's this operation was made for a reason. The Russians currently are trying to find a solution how to combine and how to operate three different armies. We're talking about the group of forces Vostok that managed to establish complete control over the settlement of Bohoiavlenka that was reported by the Russians. The Russians involved the group of forces South that managed to establish complete control over the village by the name of Katerynivka. And the Russians are using the group of forces center that managed to establish complete control over the village of Gornyak. 3 different armies, and the Russians are trying to find a solution how to operate with these masses. Obviously, this is very interesting. Now let's move further and let's talk about additional progress of the group of forces center, because according to information we have from different mappers, the Russians managed to improve their positions in the eastern part of the village by the name of Selydove. So these are the changes on the ground during the previous 24 hours. And the Russians managed to improve their positions on the territory of the village by the name of Novoukrainka. The video was published by the Ukrainian sources, and in this video we can see several FPV drone attacks or artillery strikes on the edge Russian positions on the territory of the settlement, basically in the central part of the settlement. Based on this video and based on the report of different mappers, we have adjusted the map along the road between the city of Selydove itself and the town of Solntsevka. So these are the changes on the ground during the previous 24 hours. And summarizing everything from this direction, we can make a conclusion that if the Russians continue attacking with the same speed, with the same force, with the same time, most likely first the Russians will be able to cut this piece of cake. We are talking about the villages of Vovchenka and the village of Kurakhove. The next step of the armed force of Russian Federation would be to cut additional territories between the village of Stepanovka, the village of Stare Terny, and the village of Solntsevka. So this is what the Russians are planning to complete before winter comes, before 2025. So the Russians currently have just several weeks to complete this mission. And of course, from this perspective, we understand the Russian plans. This is the Kurakhove cauldron that the Russians are trying to create with the use of 3 armies. The Ukrainians that are located between the settlements like Shevchenka, Zelenovka, Sukhiye Yali, Ganovka, Dalnya, Kurakhove may be caught in cauldron during the next 2, 3, 4 weeks, and this is exactly what the Russians are planning to achieve. And this information we can receive according to different military experts, different mappers, and just by logical drawing of all these arrows by ourselves. But today we got a very interesting report from a very reliable pro-Russian source. And that was just a single post that was published during the day in the Russian segment of the Telegram channels. And most of the mappers, most of the people, most of the experts didn't mention this post, but I paid attention to this post because this post changes the game completely. For example, today some pro-Russian resources reported that was just one message, but one very important message. There was a report that the source on the ground reported that the Russian troops are advancing towards the village of Constantinople. And I started searching for this village, and I found the village, and this village is located to the west of Kurakhove. So this is the village of Constantinople, and according to some reliable pro-Russian sources, the Russians are advancing currently in this direction. And obviously the Russians are moving in this area from the village of Yasnaya Polyana. And most likely the Russians are moving along the regular road. We're talking about this road, and this is the way how the Russians probably these minutes are storming in the northern direction with the purpose to answer the village first, the village of Rozliv, and then to answer the village of Constantinople. And of course, this is a very dangerous maneuver of the armed force of Russian Federation, but today some pro-Ukrainian sources from some generals of the armed force of Ukraine reported that the South Donetsk defense of the armed force of Ukraine collapsed completely, and Ukrainians are no longer control the situation and are no longer able to slow down and to stop the Russians. And probably the Russians see this situation as well. Of course, they are not stupid, obviously. And there are very high chances that right now the Russians are trying to move in the northern direction with the purpose to establish complete control over this settlement by the name of Constantinople. And as you can see from this perspective, from this configuration of the map, this is a completely different story. This is not like a semi-encirclement of Kurakhove or artillery pocket of Kurakhove. This is the complete disaster or complete trap for the Ukrainians that are currently located on the territory of these settlements. And most likely we are talking about several thousand people, several thousand Ukrainian soldiers that might be caught in cauldron, and we are talking not about days or weeks, maybe they might be caught in cauldron during the next 24 hours, because once again we got this report today that the Russians are moving to Constantinople. Yet we haven't received anything that can confirm this. We're talking about pictures, satellites, or different mappers update, or of course geolocations, but we start receiving updates like this. And of course, this is very interesting, because if this information is correct, and if indeed the Russians today tried or are trying right now to attack in the direction of Constantinople, and if the Russians are able to take the settlement under control, then the Ukrainians who are currently located in this agglomeration will lose any possibilities to evacuate their soldiers, assets, armored vehicles, and many other different things. And this is going to be the significant defeat of the armored forces of Ukraine since the beginning of the special military operation. This is going to be 100% cauldron, like in books or in the universities. Now let's move further. And let's talk about the city of Selydove. Today the Russians published, also the Minister of Defense of Russian Federation reported that as a result of clashes, the Russians managed to establish complete control over the territory of Selydove. The Russian sources published the video, but this video is from the landfill and the industrial zone and the mine of Kurokhenka. So it happened like in the eastern part of the settlement, but anyway, based on the Minister of Defense, we have adjusted the map. For example, this is the situation by the end of the 28th of October. We had the majority of the city in the gray zone, in contested area, and today we have colored everything in Russian favor based on the report of the Minister of Defense. As for the directions of the Chasiv Yar direction, the Toretsk direction, or the Siversk direction, during the previous 24 hours we haven't received anything special, just regular military updates. As for the Kupiansk direction, we have several updates that confirm additional progress on the ground of the armored force of Russian Federation, at least on the territory of the settlement by the name of Tarskoye. This information was provided us by neutral mappers, and we got reports about very heavy clashes on the territory of Terny. We had additional videos of how the Russians were bombing and attacking the Ukrainian positions on the territory of this settlement. As for the northern Kupiansk direction, we have changes on the ground. Some of them were confirmed, some of them weren't. As for the Oskol River, according to information we have, the Russians managed to improve their positions, and we got report from neutral mappers. Currently, the Russians, according to these reports, managed to secure the village of Krugliakovka completely, and the Russians entered the northern part of Zagryzovo. So the clashes there are very heavy. Furthermore, the Ukrainian sources published the video of how they were FPV droning the Russian forces along this tree line to the east of Kolesnikovka. Based on this video, we have adjusted the map and colored these tree lines under complete Russian control. Furthermore, we have reports that the Russians improved their positions in the northwestern part of Petropavlovka. That was stated by the pro-Russian mappers. Summarizing everything, currently the Russians may establish control over something like this. This is the significant progress, obviously, and obviously the Russians also do have some plans. As for the Sudzha direction and Kupiansk direction, we have just the regular activities. A lot of FABs, indeed a lot of FABs arrived on Ukrainian positions. The Russians are bombing this territory. We continue receiving different rumors and talks that the Russians are about to begin using the North Korean soldiers and troopers, but still without any evidences on the ground. Western countries and Zelensky himself personally are waiting for the first pictures, and the most important, they're waiting for the first prisoners of war from the North Korea, because according to information we have, if Zelensky is able to capture some of them, then most likely the Western countries will lift any restrictions for Zelensky to attack deep inside the territory of Russia. And also, we got today a very important statement and some information from different sources that there was a secret part of the Zelensky peace agreement that he shown to the Western countries, and in the second part of his plan, Zelensky asked for Tomahawk missiles with a range of 2,400 kilometers, which is 7 times the range of the ATACMS missiles. And the thing is that we see that all these reports start publishing today, because this is something like a message from the Western countries to Russia not to introduce Korean forces on the ground. Because if you introduce them, then most likely we will lift the restrictions and we will start talking with Zelensky about providing him these Tomahawk missiles. But obviously this can lead also to the Third World War, and also everybody understand this. And that's it for the video for today. Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes to my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.